Okay, Aiko, you can plug in. Okay, I hope you're seeing the agenda. I'm going to try to let everybody know where we are and what's next and so on. We'll do a brief follow up of last week's topics, and then we'll return to American history with an emphasis on John Fremont and his meddling in the Mexican American War, meddling in California. Okay. So I thought we talked about immigration last week. I thought this was a great quote by the governor of Illinois. The immigration is the secret sauce of America, which I think we all believe instinctively, and how much we love the diversity that it brings in culture and music. And he points out an interesting fact: 46% of Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or their children, which I thought was remarkable and worth sharing. Okay, basketball. Jim wants me to talk more about basketball. Who knows? It may happen with the Warriors' recent success. So the Warriors won, and their next adversary in Minnesota, where the Minneapolis Lakers were playing in the 1950s, when some of us were following NBA basketball. And the Minneapolis was called the Lakers because Minnesota's full of lakes. So when they were purchased by a Los Angeles franchise, they didn't have enough imagination to change the name. So this is the great George Mikan. And the other Minnesota connection is now they're called the Timberwolves. They started a new basketball team. And one of the Warriors' great hopes this year is Jimmy Butler III, who once played for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And all of the Warriors' stalwarts are over 35. I'm giving you very critical information for following the sports page coming up. So time waits for no man, but as in this great movie, The Seventh Seal by Ingmar Bergman, this knight returning from the Holy Land is stalling time or death in a game of chess. And so maybe that's where we are. Ramsey sent out something interesting this week. Cinco de Mayo was also Karl Marx's birthday. So he thought that we should wish him a happy 207th birthday. But the relevance of that is Ramsey and Aiko and I and Janet took a trip to his birthplace in Trier for his 200th birthday. And Trier rolled out the carpet for this communist. Very interesting. So Ramsey launched off on a what if, and his what if. He looked at that was also Canada's true Independence Day from the War of 1812. And we sent off the British at the Battle of New Orleans. And finally, Canada was free of American meddling in the Great Lakes region. And their absolute independence from Britain came at a sensible, good time without much violence. And so Ramsey asked,
Yeah.
what if our land speculators that speculated on the Ohio Valley, as we covered at the very beginning, were willing to wait a little bit longer and then they put off this revolution and we stayed as a British colony. Slavery would have been ended on Britain's calendar in 1820, and we wouldn't have had to have a civil war. God knows the Indian Native Americans might have done better. Um, and but the important thing is we'd have a parliament now, and we could launch a vote of no confidence. But we don't have that. And so Ramsey's other point is we could be focusing more on fairness than our obsession with individual freedom. So just a nice little birthday what if. Okay, Canada. I wanted to do a follow up because some interesting graphics came my way. The interesting thing is Canada really has economic problems, and their problem is their provinces don't trade much with each other. Their trade practices are integrated more on a north-south axis, so they're trading more with the provinces are trading more with America than they are with their Canadian neighbors, and this graph shows that interestingly. Um, the other interesting thing is population density. So if you look at this map down here, you can see a lot of density is in this southeast finger, which is amplified here in this corner. But this line is really arresting. You draw this line across that finger, and you get 50% of Canadians living south of this line in these two little fingers. So very bizarre. Here's a population density of Central and North America. And you can see Canada is very thinly populated, except over here. Um, then the author pulls out the OECD comparisons on productivity. And you see Canadian productivity, it's much below the OECD average. We're slightly above the OECD average. But Canada is way below, particularly Quebec. So they're pulling down the average, the French part of uh, uh, Canada. And therefore, the standard of living in Canada is really suffering. It's actually going down while our standard of living is going up, up, up. Um, the other thing, it's not just Canada that benefited from a Trump bump. Australia did too. And their Labor Party has been in power, but they were on their way down. And their Liberal Party, which is in fact their Conservative Party, was ahead until Trump started his shenanigans, and then Labor went up, and they won the election last weekend. So there you go. Tariff and manufacturing, economists came out with this very interesting analysis of the prospects and the fortunes of a manufacturing dream, make America great again. And it's going to be harder and tougher than Trump thinks. And here's why. Three reasons. Reason number one, the labor supply in America. First of all, our workers get twice as much pay as the ones in China. So that's going to pull down our competitiveness. But even being paid twice as much, companies are still not able to attract enough Americans to work in manufacturing. Businesses are complaining that they can't get workers. A full fifth of all businesses say they can't operate at full capacity for the lack of workers, particularly skilled workers, welders and electricians and machine operators. And even in robots, you'd think if we're having a hard time getting workers, at least we'd be ahead in robots, but we're not. And this is an interesting ratio of the number of robots per 10,000 employees. And you see that South Korea leads the pack, and they're continuing to improve. China took a big jump in the last 3 years. And the United States is behind all them, and Germany and Japan as well. A lot of problems with manufacturing in America. The number two problem is we're not going to catch up because it's too hard to build factories in America. Take, for instance, all the businesses that Biden subsidized, particularly in the making of computer chips and green technology. Those projects are mired in delays or shelved altogether. So these hopes that we had for Biden's intervention to pay off, even if it meant paying off during Trump, may not come to pass just because of the delays. And there's an example here. And this kind of echoes Ezra Klein's abundance thesis. It's poorly named, but the abundance thesis just states that Democrats have a hard time getting things done, either from red tape or excessive concern about environment would be examples. And particularly targets construction work in America. So our overall productivity isn't bad when you take into account services, but construction, making things, the productivity is very poor in that sector, and relatively has actually fallen since the 1960s. And who to blame? We talked about regulation, NIMBYism, talked about labor shortages. And so American factories are aging. And the average factory in America was built 50 years ago. So think about that. Not much has happened. And then problem number three is the infrastructure. Particularly our electric grid. And new factories, if they are built, you can't plug them in to the electric grid for years. So that's a real problem. Rudy, he's here today, and he's going to rewire his house, so he knows something about this. And so I guess it's the knob and tube system with a lack of a dedicated grounding wire. And so it's a problem. Um, Transport infrastructure is no better. Take bridges. We're in terrible shape. I remember a report by the American Association of Engineers on bridges. Well, here's another association and industry group pointing that out. And many bridges have exceeded their 50-year-old lifespan, which makes you kind of nervous. And we're sitting on real problems here. And so climate change isn't making our roads and bridges last longer, making them last less. Plus larger vehicle weights and traffic. All these things are a problem. We remember in Trump's first term, Infrastructure Week was a joke. It kept happening and nothing ever got passed. But today it's even a worse problem. And Trump's policies might make it worse still. With 23% of workers at construction sites are immigrants, and half of those are illegal. So Trump's policies are going to worsen the labor shortage. And tariffs are going to raise the cost of steel and machinery and the raw materials and everything you need to build a manufacturing plant. Good luck. Trump's flip-flopping is making everything worse, hard to plan and make decisions. So The Economist ends the essay by saying, America leads the world in cutting edge technology like semiconductors and pharmaceuticals. And that's because we have more research and development than any other country or did have. Hopefully that'll somehow survive Trump's second term. The Economist says, "Hey, why don't you do what you do best and in services and keep on designing the future as you have with computers and pharmaceuticals?" And here you have the touch of life between a human hand and a robotic one. Ukraine, quite a shift in mood in Ukraine. Trump has decided to treat Zelensky as an equal. And the Economist makes a big deal about this, the symbolic face-to-face, man-to-man. At last, so much different than in the Oval Office. His Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, is actually leading the charge on helping set up this new investment fund. And it signals to Russia that America is committing itself to a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine. Let's see. Homer must be at home. Okay.
I'm in, thanks.
The fund that's been set up is a 50-50 proposition. It'll be funded by revenues for new licenses for companies that want to explore and extract. And the great thing, it gives American an incentive on continuing to support Ukraine. Trump's always wants to make sure he's getting something back. Now, America will get preferential access for these deposits. And here it's color coded depending on what kind of mineral we're talking about. But you can see here that around 30% of the deposits are in Russia occupied land. So Russia it controls about 20% of Ukraine. So these lands are preferentially more dense in minerals. Um, the other great thing, Scott Bessent made sure that the text blamed Russia for starting the war, which is a big change of heart. Trump was spouting all kinds of nonsense about that, but somebody turned his head to the truth. Um, for the first 10 years of the agreement, the profits will go towards rebuilding Ukraine. After 10 years, then the profits will be distributed. So that's something. And Ukraine will retain full ownership of its own natural resources. This was accompanied by, yeah, Bob.
I was just going to ask, I don't quite understand which private mining company in the United States is going to decide that it wants to take part in the extraction of minerals from Ukraine when the profits for first 10 years are going to rebuild Ukraine and not be returned in any shape or form to the shareholders of this
No,
American company.
I'm not sure, Bob. I'm not sure, but I think it's the licenses, the selling of the licenses that is going to be what gets the profits. I think the companies will be allowed to conduct business there. Obviously, how much it has to pay to keep its license is critical. But I think
Good point.
it's
It's a
not
bit
the
like drilling
profit.
for oil in the North Sea or the Mexico or the Gulf of America. You have to pay for the license. I get it. Thank you, John.
Yeah. Okay. And this agreement is accompanied by our first sale of weapons during the Trump's term of office. Before that, we had been withholding weapons. And I mean, who thought the Secretary of the Treasury would be cheerleading for a prosperous Ukraine over the long term? And
Excuse me, John, are we selling weapons to Ukraine? We formally gave them to Ukraine, did we not? Or we gave them money to buy the weapons.
I think so. I'm not sure about that. We'd have to look at the fine print. I know some of it was in the form of loans, and who knows when they'd ever be in a position to repay loans. So it might have we might have just said, okay, it's a loan, but we'll probably wind up writing it off. But the great thing is, if there is a peace accord and American business is invested there, that's almost not quite as good, but almost as good as having troops on the ground. A couple of caveats. It takes 18 years on the average to develop a mine. That surprised me. And I've already mentioned that 30% of the minerals lie in Russian-occupied areas. And Macron, he set up this face-to-face meeting in Rome. He manages to get his finger in all the pies when it comes to photo opportunities. Remember, he pulled that off with Notre Dame getting the rededication, getting these guys face to face, and he somehow managed to do it in the Vatican. So go figure. And there's a sense now that Trump is on to Putin's delaying tactics. And he even says that Putin may be tapping him along, which I guess is playing him along. Victory Day is Friday, and guess what? That's going to be problematic. Why? Because Ukraine has become the steel porcupine with all of the drones. Its drones, land and sea, are helping neutralize Russia's former dominance in the Black Sea. But they're also closing down Moscow airports. And this is just from this morning. 20 world leaders are supposed to be landing at the Moscow airports for this Victory Day parade. And Zelensky is saying, hey, come at your own risk because Russia may not be able to protect you, sort of announcing that they're going to an attack. And all of a sudden, European leaders who are soft on Putin are getting sick. So they may not be attending this year. And it's a banner year. It's 80 years since the end of World War II. So this is a big Victory Day. All right, war crimes. Britain has backed a Nuremberg style trial for Russians in lieu of all that has been documented. And within the last couple of weeks, we see that the former president of the Philippines, who openly said he was going to deal with drug dealers extra legally, which means assassinating them, which he did. He's being brought to justice at the International Criminal Court, who has also indicted Putin and Netanyahu. So this shows that the jurisdiction lingers, even though Duterte withdrew the Philippines from the International Criminal Court. Well, that wasn't good enough, and he's in custody. So this has already had real consequences. Putin couldn't attend the BRICS summit in South Africa. And of course, it's got to be on Netanyahu's mind when he travels abroad. There are some places that might arrest him. All right. So back to our main goal, our quest, which is to quickly go through American history that foreshadows this strange moment we're living in. This is not a comprehensive a look at American history. just focus on those circumstances that maybe make this moment more understandable. At the end of last week, we talked about John Fremont and his scientific expeditions. His first one was to kind of lay out a Oregon Trail, and he, in particular, had to get across the Rockies, part of the Rockies, at the South Pass. And when he went through there, there's in Wyoming there is a Fremont's Peak where he planted the American flag. So this is the Oregon Trail, and this is the South Pass across the Rockies that set all this up through the Wind River Range. So the second time Fremont went across on the Oregon Trail that he helped set up, he looked south and could see the Cascades, Mount St. Helens, Mount Hood. So he decided to go on down. He went down into the American River Valley to Sutter's Fort. And American settlers that were living there greeted him, and he talked to them. The Americans were there without official permission. That means the Americans living in California were undocumented illegals. Fremont looked around and saw that nobody was deporting them, so he figured that Mexican authority over California was weak, and that was going to play into what he had in mind. So with John Fremont, he's important enough to have a city in the Bay Area named after him. So I think it was worthwhile to zero in on his biography. First of all, he was illegitimate. His mother had married a prosperous plantation owner, and she was beautiful. This plantation owner thought she needed a bit more refinement, so he got her a tutor, Fremont's father, who was a French-Canadian intellectual. And they fell in love and fled to Savannah. Interestingly, taking along some slaves from the husband. Savannah was a tolerant city, and John was born out of wedlock. He grew up restless, eager to prove himself, very competitive. It was said that he was handsome and easily attracted patrons, one of whom saw that he was pretty smart and provided for his education, something that his father couldn't do on the salary of a teacher. So he was well educated, and he was good in mathematics and natural science. So started off as a surveyor, but that easily spilled into exploring, as we've said, with his Oregon Trail. But in his early days, the first surveying he did was the Trail of Tears that the poor Cherokees would take west of the Mississippi, kind of a melancholy assignment. And then the Secretary of War took note of Fremont and sent him on that expedition that we've already talked about, opening the Oregon Trail. And one of his scouts was Kit Carson, who he paired up with on a few of his expeditions. Um, when he went across the Rockies, he planted a flag on Fremont Mountain and claimed grandiloquently all the land west of the Rockies for the United States. And he stuck with it, that belief. When he got back, he reported to the Senate on the results of his opening up an Oregon Trail. And a leading senator of the time was Thomas Hart Benton of Missouri. And here we get into manifest destiny, which we've talked about a lot. Benton was a powerful advocate for manifest destiny. And he had a daughter, and Fremont fell in love with the daughter, and who was 16, and they eloped. And Benton was furious, but once he reconciled himself to the marriage, he arranged for Fremont to take another trip. And so Benton became one of Fremont's patrons. This is all laid out pretty well in this book by H.W. Brandt, The Age of Gold. And it goes into detail of Jessie and how much she supported Fremont and how and the risks that she took for him. One particular detail was her passage across the Panama Isthmus. And it was before the canal. It was harrowing. I think it was harrowing after the canal, the first few years. But it's worth reading this book just for something like that. So here we are now. This is where we started. So our flashback is over, and Fremont's coming in and realizing how weak Mexico's grasp of Northern California is. So he goes back and he says, the Mexicans, they have a very tenuous hold. And James Polk had just been elected, and that was one more a bit of information that pushed him into starting a war with Mexico. And Benton quickly realized that we got to send Fremont back to California. So the Senate financed a third expedition with 60 men. This time they were going to survey again, but this time they were armed. And Kit Carson was ready to help him turn his scientific expedition into a military one if war started. And Polk, before Fremont left, met with him in a cabinet meeting. And after that discussion, Polk was even more determined to take California. So Fremont had fallen in love with California. And even with this secret goal, he would overreach the power that had been given to him, and would later be tried in court as a court martial, which he succeeded. But on this third trip, he did something amazing. He got to past the Rockies, but he could see that winter was coming, and he had to make a decision. he was afraid that if he continued on the Oregon Trail, they would get caught in the winter, and so he made a very risky decision at Fort Hall. He decided to blaze a new trail through Nevada straight to California. And this shortcut that he set up to Sutter's Mill paved the way for thousands and tens and thousands of immigrants to California. So he gets to Sutter's Fort, and this time he's more daring. He starts to stir up enthusiasm among the American settlers who were there illegally, as it was. And he told them that if a war starts, don't worry, America's going to protect you. And to probe a little bit more, he went to Monterey, the capital of Mexico, California. And there, the American consul was a guy named Larkin. Think of the street in San Francisco. And the commandant was a guy named Castro. And Castro wanted to know what he was doing there, and Fremont says, well, I've been doing some surveying, and I just need to get more supplies. And then while he was in Central California, he met up with more Americans. I think one of them was John Marsh of our own county, Marsh Creek Road. And they met near Mission San Jose, which was both a town and a mission. And Castro, upon hearing about this, told Fremont to get out. I order you to leave my country. And Fremont withdrew through the Salinas Valley, but at the top of Salinas Valley was a nice little mountain peak, which he named Fremont Peak. He in the habit of naming mountains after himself, and he planted a flag there for all of Mexicans to see that he was defying Mexican authority. So let's fast forward a year now to mid 1846, and the war was a certainty. And he rejoined with the Sacramento Valley insurgents, and they attacked a horse corral that contained 170 horses intended for Castro's Mexican army. Now, independently, and we know a lot about the history of Sonoma, but Fremont wasn't there. Independently in Sonoma, 34 armed rebels captured Sonoma. And the Mexican residents that noticed this American riffraff causing trouble called them the Bears, the Osos. And thus the Bear Flag Republic was born. They captured Vallejo and took him and 3 other men prisoner. Vallejo, by the way, was not a patriotic Mexican. He was old school Spanish loyalist, which is very different. called a Californio as opposed to a Mexican Californian. Nevertheless, he was unnecessarily taken a prisoner, and he managed to sweet talk his way out of the problem. But in the meantime, the Osos, these pesky bears near Sonoma, formed the Bear Flag Republic, and electing this guy, William Ide, as their leader. And they came up with this dirty old flag. And Fremont, from a distance, denied knowing anything about it. And he later on started signing his letters as the military commander of U.S. forces in California, so thus dropping all pretense of not knowing what was going on. So the Bear Flag Republic only lasted 25 days before being incorporated into the United States, which claimed the territory by the end of the war. And one last thing that we can credit Fremont with that affects our daily life here in the Bay Area was his naming of our Golden Gate. He wrote that the reason he named it the Golden Gate was for the golden horn in Istanbul, formerly Constantinople, formerly Byzantium. It always been known as the Golden Horn, and he thought that this was going to open a golden gate for trade with the Orient. But remember, the Golden Gate was named before gold was discovered in California. It was just very serendipitous that he named it within a couple of years of when this would become the Golden State. But the naming of the Golden Gate preceded that. Interestingly, the Chinese always called San Francisco Gold Mountain. So fast forward a little bit, just while we're on Fremont and this era, for his efforts, he became the first United States senator from California in 1850, as soon as it became a state. And we'll go in more detail as to how it became a state. And he parlayed that and became the first nominee for president of the new Republican Party. The second person to run under the banner of the Republican Party, of course, was Abraham Lincoln. But John Fremont was the first. And he lost that election to James Buchanan, one of the worst presidents in the history of the United States. So how are we doing on time?
5 minutes.
We've been talking about James Polk. You'll remember his mentor was Andrew Jackson. Polk was also from the state of Tennessee, and he had been leader of the House of Representatives when Jackson was president, so they worked closely together throughout their political life. And upon winning the presidency for himself, he vowed to break the political establishment that had thwarted Jackson's expansionism, manifest destiny. There was one more member of the Tennessee Mafia, and that was Andrew Johnson, who Lincoln picked to be his vice president. in 1864. In an effort to bring harmony to the country, he chose a Southerner, another Tennessean. Polk, though it wasn't easy, it took 9 ballots for him to win at the Democratic Convention, and Jackson finally pushed him over. It was only his promise to only run for one term that made him the unity candidate. And one of his leading planks was the support of the annexation of Texas. And you'll remember from our discussion of Tyler how Tyler set the table for Polk by getting the army into Texas and on close to the border with Mexico. So that first year, Polk's in. We had claimed Texas. This was clearly claimed territory, but there was disputed territory. And this was kind of throwing American politics off because Texas was going to come in as a slave state. And that was going to be upset, but Polk had a remedy, which was to conquer more territory to balance out Texas becoming a state. He sent Zachary Taylor across the border, or ignoring Mexican demands, and he built a fort right on the Rio Grande. And Mexico declared war. Enter Santa Anna, one of the most colorful Mexican political players, ostentatious, dictatorial, and he constantly abused power by calling on the military, with whom he was a general and had strong ties. Thought very highly of himself, taking on grandiose titles. Famously, his leg had to be amputated after a battle, and it was buried with full military honors. Interestingly enough, later on it was dug up and taken as a war trophy, where it now resides in the Illinois State Military Museum. Thank you, Santa Anna. So he was out of power and in exile when Polk was scheming. And so Polk sent agents to talk to the exiled Santa Anna and said, listen, we'll smuggle you back into Mexico with our ships, but once you get there, you broker a deal for California and the rest. And Santa Anna said, sure, no problem. But once he was back in Mexico, Santa Anna reneged, and he took up arms against the United States invasion. So Polk was double-crossed. So the war is going to start, and Polk expanded the territory, transformed America, and one article said he was the most accomplished president in between Washington and Lincoln, if you consider what he achieved in expanding America's borders. He was a stubborn Scots-Irish frontiersman, a smaller-than-life figure, but harbored larger-than-life ambitions, was the quote that struck me. very vigorous. In some ways, Polk was better than Jackson. So this author says Jackson lacked the knowledge and the self-discipline. His vice president had the knowledge and the self-discipline, but lacked the bloody-minded will. But Polk had both of those. So this is where we'll start next time and just review how the war played out. So this is where I'll stop and take questions and comments.
Yeah, I'm not in there.
Yeah, Bob.
Well, my question goes back to some of the information you gave us on Canada. If someone landed from Mars and today and observed the flow of trade, the interaction of people, the common language, would they draw a conclusion that Canada was indeed the 51st state of the United States?
I guess until they watched the Parliament and the Congress, very different. Canada and America have always been interlocked on military actions. I think Canada and Australia have always been steadfast allies. So how about the rest of you? Any other ways that we
Yeah, Don, it's Pepper. I love the trade of Canada to the south. You implied that because they're farther north, most of their people live in the south and they trade with mostly us. And part of that's geography, right? As you go farther north, it gets pretty cold in Canada and you can't grow stuff. And so it actually makes more sense that Canada would have like 4 or 5 states, each of the provinces, because then they'd be more similar size to Montana and Alaska. But thank you. It's a cool way to look at the world and trade, and I love your comments.
Yeah, thank you. Just remember, though, the origin story. So Canada was originally populated by loyalists who didn't want to give up being part of the British Empire. Interestingly enough, loyalists were the strongest in New York because that was a city of merchants, a Dutch city originally of merchants, and they didn't want to give up being in an empire because before the British Empire, you had the Dutch Empire. So they, by personality, they started off on completely different tracks, but over time, kind of blended.
Well, John, oops.
We can hear you.
Just on Canada and the U.S. always being on the same military plane. They were on the plains of Abraham, but fighting each other in the War of 1812. So they weren't always arm in arm. And in terms of who was first settling in Canada, the French Canadians the French preceded the English in any number. And their attitude during the War of 1812 and actually during the War of Independence is kind of strange. They just stood back. They didn't want to be part of it. You would have thought they would have liked to help, throw a blow at les Anglais perfides, but they didn't. They just preferred to stay out of it altogether. And a final comment, new topic, is Fremont's wife. Maybe you'll get to her next week. But when California had a referendum as to whether to be a slave or free state, she was very strong in organizing salons and meeting and politicians in maintaining California as a free state.
Yeah, yeah. She was from Missouri, so you could have gone either way. So good for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, personal.
By the way, I think as the history goes too, is the Hudson Bay Trading Company, they actually were by the Scots, and that were basically gotten over to thrown out from the lowlanders versus the highlanders, and so the Hudson Bay Trading Company then, and they actually came all the way across to the British Columbia even.
Oh, really? That was in the Highland clearances, huh?
Pardon me?
It's called the Highland clearances when they cleared the tribes out of the Highlands of Scotland.
Yeah, that's true. And so they were basically had where to go, and so you basically headed off to North America. The
Yeah,
other thing too is that our Canadian, if you look at the Vietnam War, the all of the people that were headed up to Canada to get away from Vietnam, and that was going on, I think, as well.
yeah. Next week we will get into Oregon and 5440 or fight, which was a Canadian issue. So yeah, more Canada. All right, guys.
Thank you,
Okay,
John.
thanks, John.
All right. See you next week.
So don't log off because we got to figure out what the problem is. Look at
Okay, well,
oh,
let,
Go Warriors. Bye-bye.